If you remember nothing else, remember this. You have the ability to be stronger than you can even imagine. And this is an enormous and, you have the ability to do that when life is at its worst, when things are hitting the hardest. When you most want to cower and retreat into yourself, that's when you have the opportunity and the ability to shock yourself to be greater than you've ever been. There are certain things I do in my life to reinforce this point. That's how important I think it is. Why? Well, not to sound tough, not for Instagram. In fact, most of the time I don't share it or post it or any of that stuff. I do it for me because it's an axe that has to be sharpened, reinforced. You know, it's been some time since I've gone on a run. Like I've said recently, for those of you following along on YouTube and the podcast, you know, I've taken you along on my fitness journey. I've been more focused on picking heavy things up and putting them down, right? The gym, gaining some weight, putting on some muscle, and it's been effective. But the other day, I'm like, I just need it. I need to run. I need to do it for me. So I put on the old running shoes and did about 7 miles. And look, I knew I'd be rusty. I knew I'd be slower than I was, a year ago, obviously, but that's not the point. The only point here was negative splits, right? It was to be faster every mile than the one before it. So right out of the gate, very slow, relaxing, 9-ish minute miles, then high 8s, then low 8s, then high 7s, then low 7s, and ended in the 6s. And it's an exercise that solely reinforces, hey, when you get tired, when things become more difficult, when emotionally, you become fatigued, that doesn't mean you slow down or you give in. In fact, you can wire your brain to say, okay, this is exhausting, so I need to be better. And that's all it was. Reigniting that flame, turning that switch on. Because the same thing, running that 7 and change mile loop, is true in life. When we're most tempted to sort of retreat back into ourselves is when we must be bigger, and we can be bigger. Let's further drill this home. From the running thing, let's move to a different metaphor. Imagine with me a bridge. And this old wooden bridge is connecting two mountains, right? Moving right through a little town nestled in between them. And for years, that bridge had carried travelers and business folks and families across the deep valley below. It was sturdy, reliable. But the reality is it had never truly been tested. That is, until one year, a storm came. And the wind howled through the valley, and the river below became turbulent and rough, and the rain beat down like war drums. All the people below, they looked up and they feared that bridge wouldn't last, that it wouldn't make it. They watched from their homes, expecting any second to see it buckle, to snap under the pressure. But something remarkable happened. The weight of the storm did not break the bridge. Instead, what it did was reveal the bridge's strength. The wood groaned, but it held firm. And the ropes stretched, but they did not snap. It stood. Not because it had never faced hardship before, but because it had been built for this exact moment. And when the storm finally passed, and those people from the town below looked up at it, they didn't see a bridge anymore. They saw an entity that had truly proven itself, that had endured. And that's what we are. It's who we are, and it's what we're capable of, right? The challenge is that we don't know we can endure until we've weathered the storm. We don't understand our ability to maintain until we've held strong against the winds, until we've allowed ourselves to rise when it feels like the world's pulling us down. The storm doesn't make us weak. It reveals how strong we've been all along. And so understand this when times are great. Yeah, why not? Put yourself through the manufactured stress, duress, and discomfort I mentioned above, when things are smooth sailing. Absolutely. But if you're in it, and I mean truly in the thick of things, right, moving through the storm, the darkness of night surrounding you, I want you to remember how much of you lives beneath the surface, waiting to be shown, to be let out, to be freed. Remember that the greatest parts of you need your permission to shine and emerge, but that when they do, nothing, and I mean nothing life throws your way, is too much to endure. Will there be turbulence and chaos around you? Absolutely, you can bet on that. But the calm and resilience within you conquers all. Always remember that. You are stronger than you think you are. You, now and always. When you lose your job and have no idea what you're gonna do next, yes, you are stronger than you think you are. When your forever person, quote unquote, ends up not being so forever, you're stronger than you think you are. When your world's tipped upside down, you're stronger than you think you are. When health issues arise, and was once, very simple, now becomes complex and chaotic and exhausting, you are stronger than you think you are. Strong enough to endure, strong enough to make it through. Again, the storm does not exist to break you. It exists to remind you how strong you've always been. If you remain calm in the midst of great chaos, it's the surest guarantee that it will eventually subside. Julie Andrews. One of the most powerful things about intentionally immersing yourself in difficult situations is that it prepares you for the inevitable adversity that will come your way when it's unexpected, unplanned. The obstacles life places before all of us. That's why I so often draw a line from physical fitness and athletics to the real world. Doing difficult training, for me, particularly endurance training or interval training, is that creates a level of exhaustion I tend not to encounter anywhere else, right? It's phenomenal practice at separating out what must be done in the moment from how we feel. It uncouples those two things. It's taming chaos in a controlled environment that improves our ability to handle stress out in the world, right? And what keeps pulling me in is when you're in it, going from set to set, 45 minutes straight with no rest, there are these particular moments where your heart rate's elevated, your body is fatigued, you're pushing your physical limits, and under a different set of circumstances, you'd stop. Maybe you'd take a breather because that's what makes sense to do. But this is what's powerful, right? In those moments, you learn to float above all of that. It's excess. It's noise. It doesn't matter, right? You're separating anything that isn't the question, what's next? You don't have to perform any miracles or break any records. No, only find a way to calmly engage in one exercise after the next, one step after another. Your job is to not stop. And again, this is a microcosm of what we deal with out in the world, when the world is chaotic and stressful. When our minds are worried about what's in front of us because we aren't sure how much longer we can sustain what's happening in the present moment. That's when we get worked up and frantic, sometimes erratic in our decision making. But this reminds you, you can be stronger than your environment, your circumstances. You can say no to the chaos that's attempting to pull you in. As Viktor Frankl has spoken, you may not have control over your circumstances, but you always have control over your attitude. What does this mean? Well, it is the incentive, the green light to step forward. You don't need to think about how you wish you felt. You don't need to think about how you might feel 10 minutes from now. No, the goal is breathe and consider simply what must be done. This idea, it translates beautifully when something goes wrong at work, when a relationship becomes fractured, when you feel slighted by life. The temptation is to let it all consume you. But if you're able to breathe in, to compose yourself and focus only on what needs to happen next, there is nothing that can hold you back. When you don't relinquish your control to outside circumstances, you have everything you need to effectively navigate through them. Nothing matters. Nothing but your ability to carry out the task at hand, to conquer that adversity that is emotion in the midst of difficulty. Right? Simplicity, as the saying goes, is the ultimate sophistication, and it doesn't get simpler than this. Breathe, execute, and you will find your way home. So imagine with me that it's a fall morning years from now. Right, the sun is shining through your window, you'd get out of bed just like it's any other day. Except this particular day would be different. It would be your last day on earth. So you'd walk outside and begin reflecting on life from day one to where you are now. And in that moment, my question to you is, what would you value most looking back? I've always been intrigued by this question. Even though it's a tough one, I like it because it's a simple reminder of what's important. It brings much needed perspective. So what would that moment look like? Your last day, when you get to look back on everything you've done, right? The legacy you've made. You most likely won't focus on how tough the climbs were. You probably won't remember the battles and the struggles. What you'll remember are the moments of victory, the times when you were able to do something significant to contribute to the world, to help and be near those who mean the most to you. What we learn as we get older, as we progress through life, is that failures dissolve, right? They fade away. They provide us with the wisdom that we so desperately need, and then they disappear into the universe. It's the other piece that needs our attention. That quote we've heard a million times about regretting the things that we don't do more than the things we do. And how fear constantly gets in the way of our potential. So imagine, right, as you continue this walk outside, that you think about your dreams, the things that fear kept you from becoming. Because on your last day alive, in the face of death, you'll probably realize that the worst possible scenario wasn't as scary as you thought. Study after study shows that the biggest regret of people with limited time left is living according to the expectations of others, not having lived a life that was true to themselves. We're fortunate enough to have that wisdom now. Why would we not act on it? Don't let yourself be the person who looks back and dreams about what if. Do your dreaming in the present. We're all writing our stories. Make yours a thriller. Make it a bestseller. Live now. Let that fear fade away, because in a universe where your existence essentially equates to a drop of rain in a thunderstorm, what the hell is there to be afraid of? Be the type of person who finishes this walk outside with a smile, content with the journey, all the turns, the adventures, the small failures that shaped who you are, the successes that lifted you up. As the old saying goes, everyone dies, but few truly live. Today, we're going to talk about keeping your head in the clouds and your feet on the ground, simultaneously managing the big picture and the small stuff. Non-stop belief that things will work, that there's an answer, that you're ultimately going to get there, and that you won't quit until you do, while also being brutally honest with the facts on the floor, the reality around you. A lot of times, I think there's a tendency to conflate positivity with a detachment from reality. But they're very different things. Right? You need them both for success to unfold. You need the big picture, and you need the minutia, the steps, the little things that add up over time. In the book Good to Great, Jim Collins calls this the Stockdale Principle, where Admiral Stockdale, I think at the time Commander Stockdale was shot down during Vietnam. He was prisoner of war for over 7 years in Vietnam, and it was just obviously a brutal experience. And, one of the things that helped him survive was being painfully pragmatic, while also knowing in his soul, right, with every ounce of his being, that he would ultimately get out, that the men he cared about and helped so much would ultimately get out. And so when Jim Collins is interviewing him, he says, Admiral Stockdale, what differentiated the ones that made it and the ones that didn't? And the answer is incredibly surprising. He says optimism. Because the people that were overly optimistic said we'll get out by Christmas. And Christmas comes and they don't get out. And then they say, okay, well fine, we'll be out. We'll see our families by Easter. And Easter comes and they're still there. Okay, maybe next Christmas. Next Christmas comes, nothing changes. He says those are the people that died of a broken heart. There was too big of a gap between the reality, the components needed to progress the way they wanted to progress and the way they were thinking. You have to be willing to look in the mirror and diagnose a situation. That's applicable to business, it's applicable to your personal life. Dream big, step small. Believe, but act. Be cognizant of the world around you, the reality that you're living in. You can't change something that you don't understand intrinsically. You can't progress if you haven't analyzed something. And this is not about your capabilities. This is never a call to doubt yourself. It's to be strategic.